Okay. So we are recording now, and I'm going to go ahead and move on to what are Cognac and Armagnac and how are they made. This is just going to be a high-level overview, very simple, and then I'll turn it over to Christine and Dan to really do their deep dive. So Cognac and Armagnac are French grape brandies. Brandy is distilled wine. Those of you who know whiskey know that it's distilled beer. Brandy is distilled wine. In the case of Cognac and Armagnac, it's grape brandies. It's wine that's made only from grapes, not any other fruit. And it's made in France. So it is French grape brandy. Very simple production overview. You start with the grapes. Crushing grapes releases their juice. And then the addition of yeast to that juice allows the yeast to consume the sugars and produce alcohol. And at that point, you have wine. In the second step, then, the wine is put into a still, which is basically just a metal vessel that is heated to a point at which primarily alcohol boils off and water does not, because alcohol has a lower boiling point than water. Then that high alcohol content vapor is condensed back into liquid form. And in the third step, it's put into an oak cask or barrel to age for some amount of time. And you'll often see on the labels, and you get these questions a lot, what is VS and VSOP and XO? VS means very special. It's at least 2 years aged in an oak cask. VSOP, very superior old pale, means at least 4 years in an oak cask. And XO, or extra old, means at least 10 years in an oak cask. Then after aging for some amount of time, the Cognac or Armagnac is sometimes blended together across vintages or producers, and sometimes diluted or reduced with water, and then put into a bottle and shipped out for consumption. So I'm going to do the slide build here to then compare between Cognac and Armagnac. Cognac, in the case of grapes, uses 3 grape varieties primarily. Uni Blanc, which is the vast majority of grapes used in Cognac, Fol Blanche, and Colombard. Armagnac primarily uses the same 3 grape varieties, plus one called Baco Blanc, which is actually a hybrid of Fol Blanche and another variety called Noah. In the distillation, Cognac does double distillation in what's called a charentaise or pot still. And if you're familiar with whiskey, you know this type of still. It's basically a copper kettle. And Armagnac, by contrast, does a single distillation, typically in a column still, which is essentially a large metal pipe that has a lot of plates inside of it and can distill kind of more efficiently. The types of wood in the maturation or the aging also typically differ. And then when you get to the bottling, Cognac is typically blended across vintages and usually reduced or diluted down to 40% alcohol by volume, or ABV, whereas Armagnac, you often find vintages in Armagnac, and fairly old vintages as well. And it is usually bottled with very little or no reduction to the spirit. Another big difference between the two is where they're made. Cognac is made in the Cognac region of France, the central western coast of France, and Armagnac made in the southwest in the Armagnac region near the Pyrenees on the border with Spain. And I know Christine and Dan are going to talk a lot more about the right side of the slide, where you see the different kind of demarcations within those areas of Cognac and Armagnac. So just briefly, how to taste Cognac or Armagnac is very similar or identical to pretty much every type of spirit and wine as well. Start with the nose, so the smell. And it's a high alcohol content spirit, so I typically like to leave my mouth open a little bit to dilute some of the vapor with air, or hold your nose some distance from the glass. That will give you a good idea of what you can expect in the spirit. Then, in the second step, take a sip, hold it in your mouth. We're not doing shots, right? Move it around in your mouth. I even like to smack it a little bit, get some air over the spirit. That will give you both the taste as well as the sensation, and those two together are called the palate. And then finally, in the third step, swallowing the spirit gives you the aftertaste and the after experience, and that is the finish, right? Is it long? Is it smooth, or is it hot? And if you read professional reviews of any type of spirit or wine or beer or even food, you get a lot of highfalutin language. At the end of the day, I like to just ask, do I like this thing, right? And a perfectly fine tasting note is, this is good, or this is smooth, or I really don't like this one, right? It's very personal. drink what you like what you drink, and please don't be intimidated by really fancy tasting notes. You know, that often, like, I read a tasting note, I'm like, I've never tasted 2/3 of the things that they're talking about. I don't think I could pick out the other third of things. All right, with that, I am pleased to introduce Dan and Christine Cooney. Dan and Christine are husband and wife team who co-founded Heavenly Spirits Imports, which is located here in Massachusetts. And we've been working with them since, about 10 years ago, when they poured at some events, like someone was mentioning before we started the evening tonight, the Fine Spirits Showcase back in 2011. And since then, I've seen them present at numerous events around Boston. Fascinating to listen to, and it's a pleasure to introduce them to the MIT alumni at large. So, Dan and Christine, I think I took you off mute.
Yep.
So I'll go ahead and turn it over to you.
All right. Can you hear us well? I guess.
Yes, loud and
They're all
clear.
on mute anyway.
Everybody's
So, okay,
on mute,
okay.
And I've stopped sharing, so you can go ahead and control the show.
Thank
Okay.
you, Kevin.
Thank you. Well, we want to
You're
thank
welcome.
Kevin and the MIT Alumni Association for inviting us to this virtual presentation and tasting of some great French spirits. I am Christine Cooney, and this is my husband, Dan. I was born in and raised in the region of Cognac, beautiful, famous region of Cognac in France. And I used to spend all my summers at my grandparents' farm, and my grandfather was a winemaker, so I learned very early on things about wine and spirits and brandies and things like that. And I think he's probably to be credited for planting the seeds in my mind of what it would be like to have a career in wine and spirits. Fresh out of college, I went to Chicago to perfect my English, and on the way back from Chicago, I met this nice man here in the plane. He was sitting next to me, and we stayed together, and it's been over 30 years.
Hard to believe
now.
I was the chatty one. So.
By pure coincidence, my first job was actually a job in a cognac company, for a cognac company. And for the past 25 years, actually 30 now, I have been working in the wine and spirit industry, both in France and in the US, all along promoting the art of fine spirits in the US and assembling a portfolio of artisanal spirits that we carry nowadays. My husband, Dan, is an artist and college professor by trade, and he has always supported me in my passion for spirits. And he became my partner in 2008 when we founded Heavenly Spirits, importers of exceptional French spirits. Like Kevin said, we're located in Massachusetts, in Lakeville, precisely, both our office and our warehouse. And we currently sell in, I think, 35 states now. And in 2009, we became the largest importer of Armagnac in the US, accounting for, I think, over 35%, maybe close to 40, something like this. So, so that's us in a nutshell. When Kevin mentioned to me that he would like to do a presentation on Cognac and Armagnac, I said, oh, that's great. And then he said, okay, that's wonderful. Can you do that in 30 minutes? And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is going to be difficult. We're going to be running a marathon here. But anyway, so I worked on reducing my script, my normal script, because normally we do that, you know, in at least 2 hours. And even that is difficult, especially when you include a tasting. So I had to rewrite my script a little bit, but I hope you guys are all.
That's why I'm not talking, because that would really put it over. So go ahead.
I hope you guys are all ready for what we call a Gnac attack, where we will be talking and tasting about Cognac and Armagnac. So let's dive in. Armagnac, I'm starting with Armagnac because it is actually 700 years old, over 700 years old. It is the oldest brandy in Europe and in France, of course. Can you imagine 700 years ago, America was just a spark in the eyes of Christopher Columbus's ancestor. I mean, Cognac didn't exist, Scotch didn't exist. So this is really, really old.
So typically at this point in the presentation, I would be saying, hey, everybody, let's have a little Pinot de Charente or Flock at this time. So you could be sipping while she's giving you the history lesson so that you don't have to wait to do the cognac. But go ahead, we're going to go right into it. Now, I hope you have something at home to sip on while you're listening to the history.
I'm sure they all do.
All right, go ahead.
Armagnac is part of a larger region called the Gascony. Do we have a map of France here? How do we, let's see, Kevin, do you have the map of France that you had before? If you can bring
Absolutely. Here, I'm happy to share my screen again and just pop that up. Oops.
Or I could put it as our background if that's.
There we go. I think I've got it.
Right. So, Armagnac is part of a larger region called the Gascony, which goes between Bordeaux, Toulouse, and Bayonne. It makes a triangle right there. And a lot of people ask me sometimes, where does the word Armagnac come from? And I said, well, it's a legend, but we think it's a believable one. The Roman Emperor Clovis gave one of his best soldiers a large piece of land, Armagnac, to reward him for being a great soldier on the field. And the name of this soldier was Armin. And then later on, it was Latinized to become Arminius, and later on, Armagnac.
Armin with an H.
Yes. So that's the legend. In a nutshell, Armagnac is born from the convergence of three major factors. The Roman who brought the vines in the 3rd century into France, the Arab scholars who basically invented the alembic, even though we were distilling in the 3rd to the 6th century, but it was mostly for perfume in Orient. And the third factor is the Celt who brought the barrels. So that's very important. This is really the major factors. And there are two parts to the history. Before the 15th century, eau de vie was mainly, this eau de vie Armagnac was mainly consumed for medicinal purpose, like most spirits, you know. In fact, the prior of the town of Eos in Armagnac wrote on his manuscript in 1310, I'm gonna read it to you because I can't remember it by heart. This water enlivens the spirits, partaken in moderation, recalls the past to memory, renders men joyous, preserves youth, and retards senility. So it sounds like they had their healthcare figured out back then. So after the 15th century, Armagnac is mostly used, not mostly used, but also used, seen on markets, local markets, and consumed as a digestive and as a drink. So that's really the two parts of the history. But now we're in the 15th century, and starting in the 15th century is also the time that cognac came into play, into the history. So cognac is right there, you have it. And briefly,
about 150 miles.
In the Middle Ages, the merchants were coming from the northern countries, the Dutch and Norway. They were coming by boat from the northern country down to the ocean and to a town called La Rochelle, right there north of Cognac, because they were coming to get salt, famous salt from La Rochelle, which is actually my hometown. And they just picked up that salt. And at some point, they had two issues.
Which they would use to salt their fish.
Right, because they were catching a lot of fish, so they needed to preserve the fish. But at some point, soon enough, they got two major issues. The wine, they started to go down Cognac and put some wine into their barrels, bring it back to the northern countries. But by the time they came back to the northern countries, the wine had spoiled. And at the same time, the French government, local government, saw that they could make some money by taxing the Dutch, only the Dutch, who would trade and bring back some white wine to the northern countries. And that tax was actually based on volume. And so the Dutch decided to use something that they had heard of in the southwest of France, a little lower down in Armagnac, which is called the distillation. And they started to burn the wine because distillation is burning the wine. And by doing so, they reduced the volume by about 10-fold. and therefore paying less taxes.
And their plan was to reconstitute it when they brought it back, right?
Yes, so then they brought it back, planning on watering it again to make it be like wine again. That didn't work so well. But what they discovered is that when they brought back the barrels full of distilled spirit, the spirit had actually gotten much, much better. And pretty much that's how cognac was born. So that's really the short story of, or the short history of Armagnac and cognac. But meanwhile, Armagnac continued its expansion. They had started much earlier, but because of their location inland, and they were not able to develop very quickly. So, but they continued their expansion. And after a few hurdles, due to the fact that the region was landlocked, like I just said, and difficult access to the port of Bordeaux, and also due to the fact that they were not able to make up their mind about which still would be better fitted for Armagnac. They came back and forth between single distillation, double distillation, single distillation. And finally, in 1936, they made up their mind, everything was resolved, and they were able to get the appellation of origin granted by the government. So, so that's basically what we have for the history. So now the way I was gonna do it is, after talking about history for about 5 minutes or 10 minutes, I'm not sure how much, my next stage was to compare those two side by side, listing, you know, the soil, the distillation method, and the aging in oak, and do this just side by side so that we can really compare. So how do we? Yeah, we can leave the maps up then. That's okay.
I could put up some images.
Sorry, I just removed it. I'm happy to let you share if you'd like.
Well, right now,
I can put. We're going to put images behind us that are different.
Oh, great.
not until we,
When
not
you
until
said,
we did, but that's okay. No, but Kevin, can you bring back the map of the crew?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, because soon enough we'll talk about it. So,
Okay.
yeah, there you go. Yeah. Just major differences between cognac and Armagnac. I will always list cognac first and Armagnac second, and we'll always go in that order for every chapter, basically. So cognac. Cognac has about 4,200 wine growers, which is pretty big, 117 professional distillers, and 283 cognac houses. That's really big. And of course, we all know some of the bigger ones, some of the bigger names, because they are everywhere in the world. In Armagnac, on the contrary, we only have 800 wine growers. That's a major difference. Only 6 wine co-op and 40 trading houses. So we have a very different landscape right there. Now we go on to the terroir and the cru. So on the top corner right, we have the map of the cognac cru. And in the center, right south of cognac, we have what we call the Grand Champagne. First of all, cognac is in an ideal location because it benefits from the ocean mist. And that's good for aging. We will talk about this later. So the Grand Champagne is the #1 cru right in the center, south of cognac. It has chalky soil, and the cognacs there are known to give a lot of length and be very mature. They just need to age a little longer. Then right south of that, we have the Petit Champagne, which is also chalky soil, but the eau de vie have an extremely good length as well, but a little bit less. But those two crus are really usually highly respected. North of that, we have a teeny little cru called the Borderie. The Borderies are very delicate and flavorful brandies. They age a little faster than the Grand Champagne and the Petit Champagne. And we have notes of violet and irises. This is a little bit different from the Champagne. Oh, by the way, before I forget, Grand Champagne and Petit Champagne have absolutely nothing to do with the sparkling from France. It has to do with the soil. The soil in those two areas, Petit and Grand Champagne, are chalky. And that soil is exactly the same in the Champagne area, eastern part of France, where we make great sparkling wine. And that's the same soil. This comes from the Latin called Campania, which means chalky. So that's the only thing that's in common. But cognac made in Grand Champagne have nothing to do with Champagne. It's a question that a lot of people ask us a lot. So I just wanted to make that little parenthesis. Around that, we have a yellow zone there that is the Fin Bois. The cognacs that are produced in the Fin Bois are usually mature faster because of the type of soil that they have. And the eau de vie produced there are very, very supple. When we taste the brandies later, we will be able to talk more about this. The brandy are very supple, very fruity, very easy to drink, and mature a little bit faster. After that, we have the light green area, which is the Bon Bois. The brandies in that area tend to be a little bit lighter, a little less flavorful. A lot of time they could be used mostly for blending, as well as the last cru, the sixth one, which is the one very, very much out there on the outskirts. That's the Bois Ordinaire, the ordinary woods. And those are really mostly used for blending, although there are a couple of cognac made on the island there that are single cru. So that's also interesting. So that's for cognac. Now move down to Armagnac. And in Armagnac, we have only 3 cru. So it's a little bit easier. And again, we're a little bit further from the sea. However, because thousands, millions of years ago, the ocean was covering this whole part, the soil in the western part of Armagnac is actually very sandy. So we have the Bas Armagnac, which is on the western part where our producers come from. And we'll talk about this. One producer is right here and the other one is right there. So 2 different parts of the Bas Armagnac. But in Bas Armagnac, most times the soil is quite sandy. And when the soils are sandy, they enable a better irrigation, better sun. The sun can actually ripen the grapes faster. And we have more subtle and refined eau de vie, in general, of course. Then we move to the Tenares, which is toward the eastern part. And there we get a little bit more clayish soil. Clay is a little hard. The sun has a harder time to get through that, and the water has a harder time to get through that. And therefore, the eau de vie can tend to be a little bit harder, although there is excellent Armagnacs from the Tenares. And then when we move toward the east, the soil becomes more and more clayish with other things in it, very tight, and the eau de vie can be hard and sometimes very closed. Very few producers actually come from that area. Armagnac coming from that area are usually used for blending. There are a few exceptions, of course. Okay, I guess we'll take questions after. I'm not used to that. Usually we take questions as we go. That's about the soil, the region, the terroir. That's very important to see the differences. Okay, so now we can, I guess, remove the maps.
We can take the map back off.
And
all right.
Stay where you are. And now we're going to talk about the grapes. So in Cognac, it's kind of easy because we use 98% of all Cognac are made from Uni Blanc. Uni Blanc is also known as the Trebbiano from Italy, from Sicily. And it's a grape that is very reliable, that gives a good foundation to any brandy that is made with it. And it doesn't take the disease or any kind of vine illness very easily. So it's a very reliable, very good yield. To make a good brandy, we need high acidity wine. So we always have to pick grapes that gives high acidity and low alcohol when we make the wine. And the Uni Blanc is perfect for that. There is also a little bit of Folle Blanche in Cognac, and also a little bit of Folignan, which is a cross between the Uni Blanc and the Folle Blanche. The Folignan, it's not very known. Very few producers have it. One of us does use it. One of our producers does use it. And it's known to give very, very floral brandies and cognacs. So that's something that some producers do look for. I mean, we could talk about the Folle Blanche and the history of the Folle Blanche. I know, Kevin, you kind of mentioned it before. Maybe I will say that really quickly again. In Armagnac, we have many more grapes to choose from. We can choose up to 10 different grapes that are allowed by the AOC, but 4 are mainly used. Those 4 are again the Uni Blanc, which is usually used for about 50% of the blend. Then we have the Colombard, the Bacot, and the Folle Blanche. There is a little bit more Folle Blanche in Armagnac. The story of Folle Blanche is very interesting. It used to be the grape that was planted all over Armagnac and Cognac before the phylloxera destroyed our French vineyard in 1875. The phylloxera is a bug that attacks the root and makes the vine die. And so our French vineyard was destroyed. So after we tried to replant, the farmers said, well, maybe we should not replant the Folle Blanche because we're going to have the same problem again. So what do we do? So they tried 2 different grapes. They tried to graft the Folle Blanche onto something that was more solid, more reliable, onto another vine that was more reliable. But none of the graft was working, and they were just about to give up when Mr. Bacot came, and who was a teacher at the University of Eau-de-Vie, and he was able to successfully graft the Folle Blanche onto a grape that came from Texas called the Noah. And that is an interesting part of the story because really, you know, America saved us in a way. So that's a little story that I like to say. Thank you for saving us. So that's for the grapes.
And it's still the only hybrid that's allowed
Yes.
anywhere in France to be used because they appreciate
the
it.
AOC tried to get rid of it 10 years ago, and the Armagnac producers actually fought very, very hard for about 2 years to tell them that we need to keep that hybrid because this is essential to Armagnac production and part of the history of Armagnac production. And they were successful in keeping it, but it is the only hybrid allowed in France for Armagnac. So let's move on to the distillation. In Cognac, we have, well, the basis of distillation, first of all, for those who don't know. Again, I'm not sure who knows what, so I'm kind of staying general, but the basis of distillation is that alcohol boils before water. Water boils at 100 degrees Celsius, where alcohol boils at 75 or 78 degrees Celsius. So because of that, when we boil the wine, we're able to actually trap the alcohol vapors from the wine. And that's what distillation is. So in Cognac, we have, can we bring the still? Who has the still?
I can do it, but it'll be in the background. Virtual, we'll just put it as a background. So which one you want?
Cognac.
All right.
Can you guys see that? Can you get rid of the window? Can you get rid of the window?
Yeah. There you go.
Yeah. So the Cognac, in Cognac, we have we have an alembic that has 2 distillation, meaning we put the wine one first time. At the end of that first time, we end up having what we call a brouillis, which is about 30% alcohol volume, and it's a little foggy. And then we take that and we put it back in the alembic for a second pass. And during that pass, we actually cut the beginning of the distillation and the end of the distillation. The beginning has too much alcohol. The end of the distillation doesn't have enough alcohol. We just keep the heart, what we call the heart. And at the end of the second distillation, the product is about 70% volume. So the whole process of the 2 pass takes about 22 hours, about roughly 10 and 12 hours, 10 hours and 12 hours. So that's, yeah, I keep turning around. So basically we put, yeah, I'm not sure how we do this. Oh.
Yeah, if you guys wanted to just pull it up as a file on a screen, you should be able to share the screen.
Okay.
Pull it up as a file on the screen.
We put the wine. Yeah. Then.
We're new to this. What?
We put the
No,
wine.
no problem. Yeah.
Salad here. We put the wine in here. The wine goes down here. It gets heated by the flame down here. It goes up. The vapors go up because they boil first. They go through a tube in the wine tank, and they end up in the coil here and go down all the way down and end up in the barrel.
They recondense.
So that's how, and this barrel here, this tank here, all the red part you see is actually water. And that's how we cool the cognac going down, the distilled period coming down all the way to the barrel. So that's the essence of the cognac distillation. Now we move on to the second distillation, which no, this one we don't have. We need to have input it in.
All right.
Can you put the still on for Armagnac, Kevin?
You mean the?
No, I don't know if he has one like that. Well, let's just stick it in as best we can.
This
This might be too big to see, and that's, we're not sure how to do it. Otherwise, they can't see that.
Yeah, it's a little hard, but yeah, we want to
open
shrink that for some reason. It didn't come up. So in Armagnac, and that's a very, very big difference with Cognac, we only do one continuous pass. So we open the season, we open the alembic for the season, and then we will just feed the alembic with wine. It is the same concept as the, there you go. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
So it's the same concept as the other alembic. We feed the wine here. It goes down, 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 down. The wine goes up, fill up this whole tank, and then it goes over here, and it goes down, and then here it gets heated by the fire, so it goes right back up, all the way up, and then it goes out here and go back into the blue coil here. And the difference with Armagnac is that the yellow part here is not water, but it is wine because we fed the tank with wine. So it's a little bit different. And the coil, at the end of the coil, the spirit comes into the barrel.
So it's more of a continuous.
So it's a continuous still. We only do it once. And at the end of that first pass, or that only pass, the brandy is actually at about 58% volume. And that's all we do. So it's very different, and it will greatly affect the difference between Cognac and Armagnac. And I have a little bit of funny things to say here. We once had, we can remove that, yeah. We once had.
Yeah, you can take that off now.
You can take that off, Kevin, if you don't mind.
Okay.
We once had two producers, one Cognac producer and one Armagnac producer. And somebody we were talking about Armagnac and Cognac, and somebody that we were presenting to said, why do you do a single distillation, and why do you do a double distillation? And this was a funny answer, because the Armagnac producers said, well, in Cognac, they have to do it twice because they don't know what they're doing. And then to which the Cognac producers said, well, in Armagnac, they have to do it once because they're lazy. So it was a funny.
They were joking.
They were joking, yeah. Of course, they were joking. So now we're moving on to the Cognac aging. And so now we're back in the cellar. Yeah. And in Cognac, we use mostly, and actually only, the Limousin oak, although now some producers are experimenting with other types of oaks, but mostly 99.9% is Limousin oak. It brings tannin and vanilla, which is what textbook Cognac want to get. So that's not, that's really just one single kind of barrel. In Armagnac, we use two types of barrel. We use the Limousin oak, of course, because it brings a great tannin and great vanilla and other types of flavors. But we also use the Gascon oak, which is the local oak that we find from the forest of Gascony. And originally, the reason they used the Gascon oak is because they couldn't afford the Limousin oak, so they were getting the oak from their own forests. But as centuries went by, they realized that actually the Gascon oak does bring something very, very unique to a Cognac, to an Armagnac, excuse me. And the Gascon oak tend to bring more, besides the tannin and the vanillin, it also brings spices and color. And a lot of time, if you compare color between Cognac and Armagnac, you will see that the Armagnac is usually much darker. And it's sometimes due to the fact that they use the Gascon oak that brings colors.
So in general, more spice and wood
More
than
spice
Cognac.
and more wood than in Cognac.
And
yes.
one of the reasons that bourbon drinkers seem to gravitate toward Armagnac.
Yes.
And they like that wood and the spice.
Yes, absolutely. We find that out, that a lot of more bourbon drinkers who are interested in branching out into the brandy category, they're more interested in the Armagnac.
As opposed to Scotch drinkers.
Scotch drinkers, yeah, would like more of the Cognac. Yeah, it's
a general generalization.
So that's for the aging. In Cognac, there is very few vintages because it's very highly regulated and it's also costly to produce vintages. But in Armagnac, even though it is regulated, it is not costly. And I mean, it doesn't cost any more than producing an Armagnac. And it's actually been how they built their reputation. They built their reputation because they were known, they're still known to produce lots of vintages. Lots of people ask us for vintage Armagnac. So that's one difference between the two. And of course, Armagnac tries to take advantage of that, you know. In terms of tasting, generally speaking, and again, depending on the age of the Cognac and the location of the producer, we're looking more into floral and subtle flavors. We're looking more into citrus, vine flowers, violet, acacia flowers. This is more what we look for. In terms of fruit, we look more for apricots and yellow fruit. In Armagnac, we have a pretty wider range of flavors. We have more, because the Armagnac is more robust, because it's only been single distilled, it's more robust, it's a bit more earthy. We have more flavors of oak, of tobacco, of quince, of pitted plum, of leather, of jam. So it is, we find different flavor profiles between those two eau de vie, definitely, definitely different. Now, a couple numbers, just so you know where Armagnac stands compared to Cognac. The Cognac production is currently 216 million bottles per year, according to the BNIC, the official regulating office of Cognac. In America, we consume 14 million bottles per year of Cognac.
But mostly the big houses.
Mostly the big houses. 95% of Cognac sold in the US are the 4 or 5 big houses, and 5% all the rest, the small producers like ours, trying to make a little bit of a dent into the market. Not always easy, but we try. In Armagnac, the production is only 6 million bottles per year. So we go from 216 million to 6 million. Quite a difference right there. And in the US, we consume about 206,000 bottles per year of Armagnac, compared to 47 million in Cognac. Basically, in America, in the US, when you buy or consume 1 bottle of Armagnac, you have 227 bottles of Cognac consumed at the same time, just to give you the ratio.
But to be fair, there are no industrial Armagnac producers.
Exactly.
There are no, I mean, we're talking, you know, those big 4, they're huge. They buy all the juice from all their neighbors, put it together, mix it up, have a formula. It's different than the small producers, what you're going to get from the small producers.
Yep. So I think that's, hopefully we were able to see the side-by-side comparison of those 2 brandies. I'm hoping that you all learned something interesting, and I'm hoping my accent wasn't too thick that you could not understand me.
I bet they're all ready to taste.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sure some of them already started.
Yeah, I hope so.
So the last part of this presentation is, of course, tasting, and we are starting with Du Perrat cognac. Dupérat is, you're going to bring it front. Wow, no, it's not showing. This virtual background is kind of weird, really. Oh, there you go.
There we go. All that. Wow. I don't know what they see. Does everybody see a bottle?
Don't know.
Anyway.
It's strange, yeah.
It is strange.
So the distillery de Perra is a very, very unique producer. It comes from the Fimbois area, the Fimbois cru, which is the number 4 cru. And if you remember what I said earlier, the Fimbois produces eau de vie that are easy to mature, that mature faster, that are really fruity and round and easy to drink. This particular distillery is very unique because they've been in business since 1705.
We're in their cellar right now. If you look
We're actually in their cellar right now. Our virtual background is the cellars.
Organic cognac.
The cellars of, bio means organic in France. So they've been in business since 1705, and but they were mostly selling to a couple of the bigger houses. They were selling the distilled spirit. But 30 years ago, the current generation decided that they wanted to start marketing under their own label. And the guy said, well, if I'm going to do that, I'm just going to do something different. And I'm going to transfer my whole vineyard into organic. And that's what he did. And so he's the real pioneer of all organic cognac produced as of today. Today, he represents about 85% of all organic cognac produced. So located in the Fimbois, what he does too, that's very, very unique. He practices fatty distillation. So if you remember, the distillation in cognac is 2 times, but when he does the second time, he actually cut the heart a little bit wider, meaning he doesn't take as much of the tails and as much of the heads as a normal producer would do. Why? Because when you do that and you keep more of the heart, you actually have more of the fatty acid, and the fatty acid is what gives the taste and the flavor to a cognac. It is very dangerous because, like I said, the heads and the tail can really, really ruin your cognac if you don't know what you're doing. So he's taking big chances, but because he's working with a product that is organic, he has less chances, pure and organic and very intense, he has less chances of messing up. So that is something very unique to this producer. Cognac du Perra is the best, the fastest selling organic cognac in the US currently. There's a couple of small other producers. Actually, some of them use cognac from the du Perra, a little bit different cognac, but it's the same distillery. The distillery uses green electricity because they do believe in the environment. They believe in respecting the environment. It's not just a gimmicky thing. They use low recycled paper for their labels. I mean, they do really believe in solar panels and things like that. So they produce about 160,000 barrels per year. So when we taste it, and now is the time we can really taste it. It's a very young cognac. It's actually 3.5 to 5 year old cognac. And some people might be scared about having such a young cognac. Don't be scared. Already when you smell it, you have the nose. The nose is very fruity, very open, very open. It's not a closed old type of cognac. It's very open, very lively. We have a sense of apricots, of crushed grape. And I'm not going to tell you too many of those words because I think...
I will. It's fresh, light, and with a hint, well-rounded, and with a hint of vanilla. And for the money, you're not going to find a nicer one, I think, compared to a lot of the big brands. I would taste this side by side with it any day for the same price, for a better price.
On the palate, it's extremely lively. Of course, it's lively because it's young, but not just that. So when you have a young cognac, and of course, there's no caramel and no sugar added to this, which a lot of the bigger industrial companies, cognac producers would do. This is a pure product. When you have an organic product, you really work with a product that is pure, that is intense. You have to know that when you harvest the grapes that is organic, from an organic vineyard, you get about a third less yield as if you were harvesting grapes from a normal vineyard. So you have less product, but it's a lot more intense and a lot more concentrated. So this kind of process really enables you to consume a cognac that is young, but very, very approachable.
I'm really getting notes of apricot this time.
Yeah,
as you mentioned,
apricots,
I don't know
absolutely.
why.
Yeah.
Sometimes,
This is
sometimes
very,
more
very
than
typical,
more than others. But
how are we doing on time? We okay? So let's move to the next.
should we ask Kevin? Are you drinking along with us? You tasting along with us?
I am sticking with the Dolores XO25
Oh,
year
excuse me.
Armagnac.
I don't know if we were better at this. Maybe we could do. Is anybody tasting this tonight along with us? Maybe not tonight, but maybe next time. Okay.
There definitely are, and I'm getting a couple of questions about your notes, which we can dive into in the Q&A.
Okay.
All right.
So let's move on to the second one, which is the La Pouillade. Again, I'm not sure. Oh, they're right there. La Pouillade from Jean Fillou. So Jean Fillou is a completely different kind of producer. It is, first of all, from the #1 cru, which is the Grand Champagne, but not only that, it is from the Golden Triangle of the Grand Champagne, which is an unofficial name. It's the top of the hill of the Grand Champagne. It's sunbathed all the time, and it's really, really the best part of the Grand Champagne. So that's already an excellent location. Very exclusive. It's an iconic house that has been in business for 4 generations, I'm sorry. And they own their vineyard, of course, 55 acres of vineyard, planted with Uni Blanc and a little bit of Folignan grape, which I had mentioned early on, which gives the cognac a very floral aromas and taste. Mr. Fillou, the distiller, is actually known in the place of cognac as the magician of aromas. He's unbelievable. He's just, it's his nickname, but he's highly respected by everybody in cognac. And the way he works with the wood is unbelievable. It's all about the wood for him. He once gave us a 2-hour seminar just about how he used the wood, what part of the forest it comes from, the age of the forest, the age of the wood, the size of the trunk, the size of the wood. Was it a humid forest or not? I mean, it's unbelievable. And so Jean-Philippe was right there. Up, right there.
This one's better.
Yeah.
Oh, there we go.
So
it's their place. Okay.
So this is the property Jean Fillou. Right now, you see all the vineyards here and all around. And this is the property, a very traditional cognac property.
The heart of the heart.
It looks grand like this, but it's actually very small compared to many others. They only produce about 60,000 bottles per year, so this is extremely small compared to, you know, the likes of Hennessy or even others, some more medium-sized company. Very small. There's only 4 or 5 people working there. They work in the vines all the time. I mean, this is just an amazing producer. Very traditional cognac, and again, very much focused on the wood and works with the wood. And this is how he gets the aromas and the length in his cognacs. Now we're tasting today La Pouillade. La Pouillade is actually one of his younger cognacs. It's only 7 or 8 years old, but we didn't want to have you purchase expensive cognac before you taste it. So we wanted to make sure you taste the style of the house by tasting something that is a little bit of their flagship, actually. It's young, but it's extremely lively, and you can feel there is a lot more going on. We still have that apricot. It's definitely there. The apricot, the grapes, the fruit aroma, the flowers, and then you start feeling a little bit of the wood really right there toward the end on the nose, and then you get a little bit of almond. It comes toward the end, and everything that you smell, this is the beauty for this cognac, is that everything that you smell actually is right on your palate. So it's really right in line. And we always say, you know, when you smell a wine or a spirit, you know, you smell what you smell, you should find again on the palate. And if you don't, then sometimes there is something wrong with the product, but you should feel the same thing. And this is typical. You smell and you feel exactly the same thing you smell. And this product is still a little young to feel a lot of rancio. So I don't know if you know what rancio is. Rancio is a taste that comes more like around 10 years old and older. And here we feel a little bit of a hint of it. It's something that happened during the aging process, of course, in the wood, in the barrel. It's a little bit like an oxidation. There is no word in English to translate that. All the experts have tried to translate. There is no translation. I like to say it's kind of buttery, maybe sometimes a little oxidation.
I like to say it's like woody mushrooms.
Mushroom. Some people don't always like that association,
Yeah,
but woody mushroom,
it's
underwood,
earthiness.
a little soapiness too, because if you put your hand inside of a barrel, the barrel inside is coated with something similar to soap, and that's what actually smells waxy, and it's a little bit like that. But the best
it's like tasting age.
The best description I've heard recently about rancio is the definition somebody gave us is rancio is the smell of time. And I thought that was actually pretty poetic and actually accurate. So the La Pouillade is Mrs. Fillou's favorite cognac. She usually serves it with smoked salmon. She serves it chilled with smoked salmon. And we had that numerous times, and it was absolutely fantastic. It's also good with blue cheese, cold again with blue cheese or prosciutto. And also it's a whiskey lover's cognac, like we were saying earlier.
I'm getting orange rind, and I think they're known for that.
A little bit of
those
orange
notes
rind,
are sort of orange peel. Yeah, probably go well with an orange peel dipped into dark chocolate.
Oh, okay. So let's move on to Armagnac. And we're going with Marie Dufault.
Oh, this is mine. This is one of my favorites.
Do you want to put the pictures?
Yeah.
So we're moving on to Marie Dufault, which is actually made by the Delors House. So Marie Dufault is actually the grandmother. Oh, wow.
That's us.
This is us next to Delors. Wow. Long time ago, yeah. Oh, the Delors House is another iconic house. It's the fastest, the most sold cognac, Armagnac in the US. Mr. Delors early on in the 1920s married Mrs. Dufault, and they established a business in Lanpax in the eastern part of the Bas Armagnac, which is the #1 cru. And today they have about 100 acres of vineyard. They started with very little, and every year they've been buying vineyards and planting vineyards because the demand is here, they're growing, and they need to plant more to produce more. But they're still considered a very small or medium-sized company. So they produce about 200,000 barrels per year, so it's obviously bigger than Jean Fillou. But for Armagnac, to compare with Armagnac, it's about medium size, yes. They use the 4 grapes, and the house style, in a nutshell, is fruit forward. They like the fruit, they distill, they make the wine, and they distill with the idea of making fruity wines, the fruit forward, that are very pleasant to drink. This is their house style, and it's really consistent with all their line. They use 85% of Gascon oak, not Gascon. Yeah, you're getting a call.
There we go. Sorry about that. Yeah, no, I'm going for this one.
So they use actually 85% of Limousin oak.
This is their
and 15% of Gascon oak. So they're looking more for the fruit and less for the spice. That's what they want to do. The 12-year-old that we are tasting is Dan's favorite.
I love this. It's one of my favorite. One of my favorites. I've got to be fair because They're like our children. We have to love them all equally.
They do a very slow single distillation, very slow, to give more and more of the fatty acids in the spirits, to keep more and more of the fatty acids in the spirit. And it shows because their eau de vie are extremely flavorful. This one is 12 years old, so it's not extremely old, but it's really, really flavorful, and had a lot of success also in competition. We had a lot of success with that product in competition. So here on the nose, you're moving away from the fresh fruit, you're moving away from the flowers, definitely, and you're going into the peated fruit, dried fruit, all sorts of roasted coffee beans or roasted almonds. Everything all of a sudden is becoming more pronounced and a little bit more bold. We have a plum, we have raisins, and of course now the rancio here is starting to get really, really prominent. It has rich flavors. Again, now you feel the toffee coming back on the palate, and old oak. It's really, really a well-balanced product.
Yes.
Guys, I am going to interrupt with one question that seems very timely. It would be unfortunate for me to wait to ask. A lot of folks are trying to open their bottle and they're having a little bit of trouble with the wax.
We've got a 15-second video on that.
Okay. So there's a few ways of doing it.
She has her way, I have mine.
Okay, get your way then.
Mine is the easiest, is to take one of the bottle openers, the wine openers that have a little knife blade on it, those little rounded knife blades, and just put it in right around where it is and just cut through it. And then make sure all the wax is off, gently turn it.
And it will brittle.
Blow off the wax that might still be in there. You don't want any to fall in. I mean, it won't kill you, but you don't want it in. Then you go like this, take it off, and then maybe just make sure, again, there's nothing left, and you're done. And that's it. Christine, on the other hand, she's known for whacking it on the floor. The cement floor.
I just take the bottle and I just knock it on something very hard like cement or metal, and I crack it gently, and then the wax will brittle. And then I just move it, like Dan says, kind of move it slowly, blow on it so that the wax doesn't stay. And then
good question. Though. We do get that question a lot.
You know,
and it's real wax that they actually dip in. And
it's a little bit of a pain to do, but
Go ahead.
It's a little bit of a pain to do, but we talked about it with the producer, but we decided to stay with the wax for a while.
Go ahead.
So, well, we're moving on to Dr. Gallon. So
they can't see this, so just keep talking.
No, I think we're moving on to Dr. Gallon now. So you change the background.
All right, go ahead.
So we're moving on to the last one. Give me the Dr. Gallon.
Dr. Gallon, moving on. All right, here we go.
Okay, so
go ahead. Just.
No, but they can't see me because I'm.
Yeah, they can. They can see you.
Okay, so we're moving on to Dr. Gallon. Dr. Gallon is actually that's a photo of the wax.
I just wanted to show a picture of the wax. This is how they actually dip the wax in.
Yeah.
To all these different colors they have from every brand, and it's done by hand, every single bottle.
And if any of you go there to visit Delors, they will make you do a bottle and dip the bottle in the wax and put your stamp, and they will sign the bottle for you.
Yeah.
Just so you know. So Dr. Gallon is the oldest distillery in Armagnac. They've
been around a long time.
They've been around since 1838. Actually, they started in 1826, but the company settled and established in 1838. So they are actually 182 years old currently. This is the oldest one. and they've had plenty of time to perfect their game. So, but they are very, very different from Delors, and that's why we picked them to show you two completely different styles of Armagnac. They 10 years ago, they used to have a big vineyard. 10 years ago, they decided to give up the part of the vineyard and the production to focus on the aging. And because the aging is very, very crucial, and of course takes a lot of time and a lot of energy and also a lot of money. So they focused on that. They only use 3 grapes in their blend. They use the Uni Blanc, the Baco, and the Folle Blanche. They don't use any Colombard. So that's already a different grape selection than Delors uses or many other producers use it. And what's different in terms of aging is that d'Artigallon uses 85% of Gascon oak. So it's exactly the reverse of Delors. They use mostly Gascon oak, and in fact, they're tending toward 100% Gascon oak as the years go by, because that's what they like. Their house style is spice. They like the spice. They like the eau de vie, of course, to be very easy to drink, but their main focus when they select their eau de vie is to have spicy eau de vie that they can age well, keeping the spice. It's really, really their style. We're tasting here the Ordage, and that's actually 15 years old.
You didn't talk about the price of this. I don't know if you can do that after.
I'm going to do a parenthesis here about the label reading because I didn't actually mention that in my presentation side by side. But they are almost similar in Cognac and Armagnac. A VS for both areas is at least minimum 2 years old. A VSOP is 4 years old. And then in Cognac and Armagnac, we have XO, which has to be now 10 years old. That's fairly recent from last year. And in Armagnac, we have Ordage, which we don't have in Cognac, has also to be 10 years old. After that, there is no real specific, except that any Armagnac vintage needs to be at least 10 years old. You can't sell a vintage that is less than 10 years old. So that's a little bit a parenthesis on how to read labels. So the Ordage from d'Artigallon is actually 15 years old. The Ordage from Delors or Marie Dufault is actually 12-year-old, but at least they're both over 10 years old. After that, it's a choice of the producer how old he wants to age it. So this Ordage is actually, if you still have a glass of the Marie Dufault and you can sample side by side, it's even better. This one here, we really go into baked apple, caramelized apple, butter, oak, and the oak smell is different. The oak aroma is different than the oak that we feel in the Marie Dufault, for example, or even from the Cognac, for that matter.
Yeah.
In the back here is a photo of the place, how it was in 1836. And to be honest with you, it hasn't changed much today.
I can show
it's
that.
Almost the same. It's almost the same, except that there's no horse.
Yeah.
There's a couple cars in front now.
And the barrels are behind the wall.
And the barrels are behind the wall.
Yeah.
But really nothing has changed. This whole facade here is exactly the same as it is now. It's unbelievable. It's beautiful.
They have a little painting over here of this scene, actually.
They have different cellars. There's cellars upstairs here that are dry cellars. They have upstairs down here in the corner that are humid cellars. Of course, dry cellars, humid cellars will give totally different brandies. And they have cellars in here. They have cellars over there, and they have cellars in another part of the village. So they have plenty to work with. They also produce about 60,000 bottles per year, so much smaller than Delors. Very small company, family owned. Okay, so now on the palette we have hints of tobacco.
I'm getting some chocolate too.
A little chocolate, yeah.
Dark.
Cocoa beans. And again, if you can compare with the one we just had before from Delors, completely two different products that will appeal to two different palates, or sometimes we like both for their various reasons. You know, I like both for at different times, different reasons. So
it might be drier and less fruity.
A little drier, yeah.
Or
yeah.
What's sandalwood? chocolate, tobacco. Good. I remember the one time we did this tasting down to Washington, D.C. for Alliance Française, and this was the winner that night. I remember everybody was saying how great it was.
It depends. I think it depends on the palate, really. Now, Kevin, I wonder if, since you do all these analysis online, I wonder if you could get one, maybe not tonight, but later, on what people like preferred in terms of Cognac or Armagnac, or if they preferred one more over the other, or that would be interesting to know what the response is, because it's always interesting to us to see what people like.
I think I might be able to hook that up during the breakouts. I'll see if I can do some real-time poll creation.
Okay.
In that vein, are you guys, while folks are enjoying these, are you guys okay if we move to the breakouts for 15 minutes or so, and then we'll come back around 8:35? Great. Okay. So, folks, I got some feedback from the last session that we did on Scotch that there was a little bit of direction needed for the breakouts. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and you'll see kind of some prompts of what the idea is behind these. Again, breakouts are really an opportunity for us to meet fellow alumni, meet other folks who are interested in these spirits, and connect as humans, and as spirits enthusiasts. And I really recommend that you take advantage of this. So the prompts that I have here are really just to introduce yourselves. And again, if you're not an MIT alum, totally fine. We welcome you. It's actually fun a lot of times to meet folks who are outside the bubble. And, we can talk about who we are, what we do, where you're from, and, the prompt I have here is to how you got interested in brandy. And if you want to talk about Cognac and Armagnac specifically, that's great. And then you can go ahead and introduce what you're drinking and how you, came to know about it, and whether it was through tonight's event or maybe you have one that you've been enjoying for years, and what you get from it. Again, if it's just that you like the flavor, that's fine. Or if you have some more specific tasting notes, that's fine as well. So hopefully that provides a little bit more direction to the thought around the breakouts. We'll do that for about 15 minutes. It'll be about, I'm actually going to make it about four to five people per room, so that it's a pretty small group. You get to know each other, hopefully make a little connection, and then we'll come back for Q&A with Christine and Dan.
Okay.
Great.
Okay.
This
So I'm gonna
is new.
This is all new to us,
We'll go
breaking
wherever
the
you
rules
want
and
us to.
stuff. We've never done that before, so.
Yep, Dan and Christine will be going into the rooms as well, so somebody's going to be lucky and get them in there.
Figure it out.
All right.
Okay.
Here we go. all right. You? Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if that really answers the question exactly, but I think that's how I would explain it.
Great, thanks. I looked into the polling, and it looks like I'm not going to be able to relaunch, but I will share the results. And I think only question 1 is completely valid, and it looks like the strong preference of the crowd is toward the Armagnac side.
Okay.
I'm
So I
curious
think
how
that's
many people actually had an Armagnac to taste tonight. I don't know if that's, you can answer that or not, but I was curious.
Yeah, I'm not, but I guess if you're drinking an Armagnac, you can raise your glass.
Raise your
We can get a good rough view from the audience. All right, yeah, me too. Cool. All right. Somebody asked, can you talk about the preparation of the wood? For example, charring, reuse. You know, we talk a lot in whiskey about charring and toasting and first, second, third fill barrels. Can you talk about that practice in Cognac and Armagnac?
Okay, so in Cognac, both in Cognac and Armagnac, usually they put the brandies in brand new barrels for the first few months or up to 2 years most times. Those barrels all have a different char. This is Jean Fillou here showing us different types of barrels. Excuse me. Of barrels of wood. There's all different char. It's exactly like in whiskey. You can char different levels, and each producer asks his barrel maker what type of char he wants.
There's also tight grain.
There's also the age of the wood. Some would have been seasoned for 2 years. Some would have been seasoned for 5 years, depending again of what the particular producer wants.
Open grain, tight grain, different parts of the forest, a drier part of the forest, a wetter part of the forest.
In Armagnac, yes. What was the question? Sorry.
Does that answer the question?
Yeah, I'm not sure.
About the different qualities of wood. It makes a big difference, but some of these guys are just experts at knowing what it will be. And I think particularly Pascal Fillou is known as, like she had said, the magician of aromas. He's given us 2-hour lectures on wood. So anyway.
But it's very similar to whiskey. They talk about the wood. I mean, in Cognac and Armagnac, we don't talk about feel and refill, because those barrels, once we buy them, or once a producer buys them, he keeps them until they're dead and they have to be thrown out, really. And they keep some of the older ones just to hold as a container, that they don't give any more anything. After 40 years, an Armagnac or a Cognac should be bottled in a glass, or put in a wood barrel that gives nothing, that is so old that it gives nothing. It's just there as a container. And also something worth mentioning that maybe some people do not know is that spirits, once it's bottled, doesn't age at all. It's not like wine, it doesn't change. And so that's important too. But yeah, the wood is so important in both Armagnac and Cognac.
Great. Couple of questions folks had about the number on the bottle, the year, the vintage. Someone asked, is that the year it was bottled or when it was distilled? Another person asked, are there certain years of Armagnac or vintages that are more desirable than others, like in wine?
Okay, that's actually a very good question. Both in Cognac and Armagnac, and again, Cognac does not produce very many vintages, so we tend to talk more about Armagnac. But there is no such a thing as good year or bad year, because you could have a very bad year, we could have a very bad harvest, very mediocre wine, but if a distiller is extremely a good distiller, he can easily make a great Armagnac. On the contrary, if the distiller gets a wonderful wine with high acidity and low volume, like it should be after a great year where the vines and the wines were wonderful, if he's a bad distiller, he could actually end up making a terrible Armagnac. So there is no such a thing as bad or good Armagnac or a good year. Now on the label, at Delors, we requested that they put both the distillation year, and that's usually the main one that says on the label, and then under that it usually says bottled in, and we put the year, and it also says the number of years that it's been in oak. And so that's something we demanded from Delors or from any of our producers who produces vintage, because we want the consumer to understand that this is when it was bottled and this is the distillation year, this is how many years it was aged. Because some of our competition, for example, they put a distillation year, but if you don't know when it's been bottled, then it could be a 2-year-old and you would be paying a lot of money for that just because it's old, but it's not old in the bottle. And so that's the difference between some of our competition and us. We demand that from our producers.
Absolutely. I like to see that transparency.
Yeah, absolutely.
Another question, maybe a little bit related, is what's the difference between a brandy and an eau de vie?
Well, an eau de vie can be made from all sorts of fruits. I mean, it can be made from plum, it can be made from apple, it can be made from grape, wine. But brandy is made from wine. So that's the difference. Eau de vie can be made. You have eau de vie de framboise, raspberry eau de vie, you have eau de vie de plum, eau de vie de pear, eau de vie of all sorts of fruits.
It's usually clear.
But yeah, usually it's clear, although some of the plum one can be aged as well.
When the brandy comes out, still it's eau de vie.
It's clear, yes.
Eau de vie.
But yeah, brandy is just wine.
Or aged eau de vie, I guess you could say as well.
Yes, yes.
Great. Going to talk a little bit about, and there are a few more production questions, but I wanted to hit some of the kind of the bigger ones on that consuming side. A couple of folks were asking about kind of how to drink it. One question was about what's appropriate glassware, especially between Cognac and Armagnac and say other types of spirits.
So it's an interesting question because we are leading a little war here, Dan and I, to a lot of the restaurants, actually, even some fancy restaurants who pour and serve brandy or Cognac or Armagnac in the balloon glass, the old-fashioned snifters. And that's really, every time it makes me so angry because this is not the proper glassware. The snifters were used when our grandfathers were drinking brandies, because at the time the brandies were not so refined, they were not so good, so they needed to be warmed up in your hand to get some of the alcohol go out so you could actually drink it. But brandies nowadays, at least the better ones, don't need to be warmed. They are so well made, so well done, especially the smaller producers, that it can actually be in a normal glass, and you don't have to warm it up. So you don't have to hold it like this in the palm of your hand to warm it up.
And it's not a coincidence that it looks very similar to the Glencairn glass. So for you whiskey drinkers out there, it's actually almost the same shape without a stem.
Yeah.
So the French are a little fancier, place to hold it. You got the stem, but essentially the shape is designed to, funnel some of the vapors out in a nice way and not hit you all at once. So
we call that the tulip glass because it has a shape of a tulip. And the vapors, the aromas concentrate, but then they open again at the end of the glass. So that's why it's a very good glass.
Great. And along those lines, a lot of questions about how to consume it. You serve it, well, you touched on this a little bit, serve it warm, chilled, room temperature, and do you recommend adding water or ice?
I don't recommend adding water or ice in any of the one that we tasted because they have been reduced to 40%, so they are not high in alcohol like some of them. But occasionally we will get a cask strength, Armagnac, for example, that is at 50 some degrees, and at at that point, we do add a little bit of water. Sometimes it helps to expel the flavors. Emphasize the flavors and the aromas. But unless if it's a brandy that is at 40%, there is no need for that. It's been properly reduced.
I agree and I disagree. I think that, again, you drink what you like. And if somebody wants to put a glass, a little ice cube and one of these nice things, even in a whiskey glass. In fact, I challenge whiskey drinkers sometimes. You like your single malts on ice or one ice cube or something, and as an aperitif before dinner. I dare you to just swap it off because everyone thinks you have to have brandies after dinner and whiskeys before. Well, try flipping it. Sometimes it's a very nice experience to swap out your whiskey for an Armagnac, on ice, and I think it's fine. I wouldn't put a 40-year-old or something, really, I wouldn't waste it, but a younger one, I think it's fine. I mean, I don't think there's anything wrong with it if that's what you like.
A younger one, like the
throat.
Dupera, we can easily put it on ice and drink it before dinner. And like I mentioned during my presentation, something like La Pouillade, which is 8 years old, so still fairly young and very lively, can be chilled and served with, like I said, smoked salmon or prosciutto or blue cheese, and just before dinner as an aperitif or as a first course. This is something that is traditionally done. But don't forget, 60% of all cognacs produced in the world or consumed in the world are consumed as a cocktail, in a cocktail. So that's interesting too. But really,
that's a whole nother show. Yeah. Cocktails with some of the products. Yeah.
Some of those.
We have a recipe page on our website that suggests different cocktails for how to drink it too.
Very cool. I think we could get that out
too, if you want.
Yeah. I did want to just note the time is the stated end time right now. However, Christine and Dan have offered to stay on. I still have quite a few questions from folks, some really interesting ones too. So we'll keep going. And guys, I did manage to remember to record the rest of this, so we're going to be able to send that out for you as well. But if you'd like to stay on and hear the responses and even ask Dan and Christine in real time by doing a hand raise, you are welcome to do so, and we will keep rolling. If you do take off, just a quick note, thank you so much for joining. It's a pleasure to host these for everyone. I hope to see you again. Our next one is going to be on June 6th. We will be doing a cocktail course, whiskey cocktails, with Sammy Karachi from Taylor & Taylor Whiskey Company, who was our company that presented at our last event as well. And then we're also going to be doing tentatively a chocolate event on June 25th with Professor Michael Sema from MIT, who will be talking about the science of chocolate, including, I hope, some phase diagrams of the different phases of chocolate and how to temper them. So a lot of cool kind of nerdy stuff coming up. But right now we're focused on brandy, and so we'll get back to that. Let's see. Oh, yes, so you were talking about food a little bit, Christine. Somebody asked, what food goes with Armagnac?
Oh, wow. Well, it depends on the age of the Armagnac, of course. Like I said, if you have a younger Cognac or a younger Armagnac, you can use it first in a cocktail, or you can use it with appetizers. A lot of the Armagnac will go well with strong cheese as an appetizer, like a younger Armagnac with strong cheese before dinner, a little cubed strong cheese, or smoked fish if you have that for first course or something. In terms of dessert and older Armagnac or older Cognac, in Armagnac we have the famous croustade, which is apple and phyllo dough tart, basically dessert that goes extremely well because it has some Armagnac in it that they flamed, and so the whole dough is imbibed with Armagnac, and it's really, really a good thing. But of course, it goes well with chocolate tart, anything that's chocolate, because Armagnac has all those coffee and the cocoa bean, roasted cocoa bean flavors that go very well with actual chocolate.
And dried fruit chocolate.
Yeah, dried fruit. Spice cake is very good with Armagnac. In Cognac, we will tend to stay again with the yellow fruit, like apricot tart, apricot cake, apricot cobbler. Those are very, very good with the Cognac. I mean, there's so many ways of consuming those.
And you mentioned already that Monique Fillon loves to serve this with a salmon.
I did,
Yeah.
yes.
Well, you're making me salivate.
I know we haven't eaten yet either, but, you know. We're
Yeah. A couple questions about the flavors. The Dupeyrat Organic seems fruitier than other cognacs I've tasted. I wonder if others would agree, and is the fruitiness related to age?
Yes and no.
Freshness.
Yes and no. I mean, fruitiness is mostly related to the terroir, to the soil, to the production, to the location. Of course, it has to do with the wood, because everything has to do with the wood and the way it's handled. But really, the terroir has a big play in it. And that's what I said earlier when I said the cognacs from the Fin-Bois area, where Dupeyrat comes, actually is known to produce eau de vie that mature faster and that are very fruity and round and very easy to drink. The other thing I would say is also that in this case of Dupeyrat, because the vineyard and the wines produced are organic, all the flavors are way, way better and more pure, more intense. Again, it's more concentrated. So I think I know it has a lot to do with that. And
No,
a lot of people,
no fertilizers or pesticides anywhere near these roots.
So a lot of consumers actually do find that the Dupeyrat is very fruity, and they say, do you put sugar in it? No, there is no sugar in it. It's just the terroir that produces a beautiful, young, very fruity.
And not only did Jean-Francois have to make his own vineyards organic, he had to convince his neighbors to do the same. So,
yeah. Interesting point. Another one is you mentioned lively cognacs a couple of times. Someone asked, does lively translate to rough?
No.
I think more fresh is what lively
fresh
means.
With a nice acidity. That's lively. Something that is in your mouth that really is moving, that is alive. Crisp. Yeah. As opposed to an older brandy that would be more earthy, a little bit heavier, you know.
Yeah. The rough is something that maybe is just too young.
Yeah.
And doesn't have a great structure to begin with. That's where you get a rough cognac.
Right. So lively probably not
more in the
getting
big
into
brands. Sorry.
I was going to say that the lively is not yet developed that rancio flavor like you were talking about earlier.
No.
Just more fresh and crisp, I think was what we mean by
that. Yeah.
Yep. Another question was about the color of Armagnac versus Cognac. They said Armagnac seems much darker than Cognac. Is that because of the oak barrels?
Yes, on Armagnac, a lot of producers use the Gascon oak, and the Gascon oak is known to give color. And so that, as a result, a lot of Armagnac are darker. Absolutely.
Okay. Can you talk about the differences between humid and dry cellars and how they affect the final product? So
a dry cellar, which is usually up in the attic, will give eau de vie that are a little bit fruitier, very, very much fruity. That's usually the trend.
There's more evaporation.
More evaporation, a little bit more dry, a little bit more intense, a little bit more fruity. Eau de vie that are aged in a humid cellar will be a little bit heavier, a little bit more spicy, a little bit more vegetal and mushroomy. But you have to know one thing is that a barrel never stays in the same place its whole life. They get moved from one cellar to another cellar. They get transfers, the juice, they empty the juice to put it in another barrel. And every time they do that, the eau de vie breathe in between. And D'Artigalon is actually known to do that.
They're really good at it.
He airs his eau de vie very often. He changes them from one barrel to another barrel very often, because when he does that, the eau de vie really breathe in between. And when they breathe, they become lighter and not heavy. And that's really one of their specialty. They do that a lot more than.
And Jesslyn are always talking about that.
They do that more than any other producers, really. So yeah, humid cellars, you have all the mushroom, the vegetal, a little bit heavier, but the humid you have dry and fruity, very fruity, very round. Yeah, and it's interesting you're saying that, because D'Artigallon precisely just started to promote 2 new products, and one of them is called Dry Cellar.
Dry cellar, yeah.
And it's an eau de vie that actually stayed in a dry cellar for a long time. Well, not a long time, but I think 2 years or something. It's the darker label. And no, it's a big bottle. But anyway, he's trying to find the bottle, but it's not there. No, I put it away. It's in the cabinet. Anyway, yeah, so that's interesting that they started to do that as well.
The label looks like this. I don't know. Yeah, there it is.
This is the dry cellar. I don't know if you can see that. It's hard to see anything.
It's fruity and fresh. Again, a crisp, trying to emphasize that fresh crispness.
Yeah, the virtual wall is not.
The younger eau de vie. Yeah.
Okay. A couple of questions here about just your thoughts on, yes, get a different ends of the spectrum. Would the 4 brandies that we've tried tonight be what you recommend for someone just getting into the world of Cognac and Armagnac? And on the other end, what would be the Cognac and the Armagnac to try before we die?
Well, we all have our preferences. I think we all have our own palate, and so it's a little bit difficult for us to speak about that. But
to answer the first question,
yeah,
I think it's a great selection.
No,
a great way to start it. You know,
yeah,
it's affordable, and it gives you a nice range of some really good smaller producers who are passionate.
Yeah, we pick those because we think it's showing exactly what maybe uninitiated or maybe a younger consumer would want to try, and it's a good beginning. Let's put it that way.
It's affordable and it's a great range. Yeah.
You know, if you start talking about personal taste, I mean, Jean Fillou, for example, in Grand Champagne, makes my favorite one is the Très Vieux, which is 25 years old. It's about $120. It's not really big, expensive money when you compare to the bigger houses. It doesn't come in a decanter. It comes in a straight bottle, but you pay for the product, not for the decanter. And that is my personal favorite. I mean, it's 22 years old, and that's my personal favorite because it's really in the medium of range of what they produce. In terms of Armagnac, we love the older ones from Delors and D'Artigallon, which are the 25 years old. The 25-year-old Delors is an amazing value compared to any other 25.
Oh,
yeah, that's it.
For price, you cannot beat that.
This sells for anywhere from $70 to $80, depending what state you buy it in. And for 25-year-old anything, you can't find that anywhere on the market. You can't find it.
But it's almost too readily available to be in that club of try before you die.
Yeah.
They have an older one, Delors, which is the authentic.
Authentic.
What is that, 30 or 35?
That's 30 years old, yeah.
30 years old. So it comes in a beautiful package, in a nice box. That's nice.
That's a really good one. But
and if I could speak up for one of my favorite cognacs too, is the Jean Fillou Cigar Club. If you like tobacco notes, and there's no tobacco used in the product, but if you like tobacco notes, really rich, dark, flavorful. Oh, what is that? 30 years old? Also?
35 years
35 year old. The Cigar Club. Unbelievable. Yeah. If you do smoke, it's even better because if you have, cigars with it or something. But it's still just fantastic.
So, and
full of flavor.
And the other one in terms of Armagnac is the D'Artigallon 25 years old. That's slightly over 100, so it's more expensive. But again, he's much smaller than Delors. But it's an unbelievable, I won't say bargain because I don't like the word, but it's an unbelievable value. 25-year-old Armagnac, it's been highly rated. I mean, it keeps getting all the awards in the competitions that we show it. And it's one of our personal favorite, really. Anything older can be sometimes too old for me personally. The older is not necessarily the better, We we were lucky enough to taste an 1845 Armagnac, believe it or not, from D'Artigallon, because it is the oldest, they have that. And we were not impressed,
Well, it was interesting.
Really?
Glad I did. You're actually
tasting
the age, but I agree with you. It doesn't necessarily make it the best just because it's the old.
Yeah, usually after 40 years old, whether it's Armagnac or Cognac, it's time to drink and time to consume it and enjoy it. Really.
Yeah. That's really helpful. Thank you. I always say with whiskey as well, older doesn't always mean better. In a lot of cases, it does. but not always. But it always does mean more expensive.
Yes, that's true. That's true.
Let's see. Does Heavenly Spirits sell small bottles of various producers of Cognac and Armagnac?
Not really.
We have the Artez.
Only one producer
That's a great way
has, only one producer has a small bottle set. It's another producer of ours that specializes in single varietal Armagnac, which is very interesting. We didn't want to introduce that tonight because we were not sure how knowledgeable the people would be, and maybe it's not the first thing we want to do. But the single varietals is a very rare occurrence in Armagnac. But we do have a producer who does that, and he has a little set of 3 little bottles of each varietals, you know, in a nice little wood box. So that's the only one that sells small bottles, and they are not sold individually.
But it's a great way, again, to learn about the individual grape varietals that go into a blend, and you can even blend your own at the end if you want to try to make your own.
Is that Artez?
Artez,
yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
The
I had your Baco.
Yes.
Yeah, there's a
the
unique
Baco and the Fol Blanche
and the
the
Uni
Uni
Blanc.
Blanc,
And it's a nice little, it's like $50 or something.
He's a great
And,
producer too, very, very unique.
Cute little bottles, and you can have some fun with it.
But, you know, in general, our producers are all very small, family owned, with not many means, and it's very hard for them to produce small bottles because it requires a different machine, a different assembly line, and or do it by hand, which is even more complicated. So we are not really able. The only small bottles we get are for samples. They're not for sale.
Again, they don't have the big advertising budget some of these big industrial players do. So we're their advertising. We do the best we can by get out there and share the information with people. So.
Yeah, what I think of some of your brands as kind of being like, well, you're talking about Armagnac versus Cognac and the volumes between the two spirits. I think of it being paralleled kind of by Mezcal versus tequila, similar kind of David and Goliath type of a setup that, you know, still very, very artisanal in the Mezcal world too. You know, sometimes fermenting in animal hides and things like that. So kind of an interesting parallel. They're wondering, has anyone ever experimented with any type of wood other than oak? Yes.
Cognac has experimented. A couple producers have experimented with bourbon cask. In fact, he had a finish in bourbon cask. He finished his cognac in bourbon cask. He got in a lot of trouble for that
because it's very strictly regulated.
Because it's very strictly regulated, and the whole official office actually had to convene and discuss for months about the type of oak that was allowed and not allowed, and in the end it was rejected. So you can do that, but you can't call it cognac. You can call it brandy aged in bourbon cask. So it needs to be a specific kind of oak. I'm not a forester or you know, specialist in that.
Well, most of it's
but it needs to be a special kind of oak, and white oak, it doesn't fit the same thing. So in Armagnac, there's been a few try, but nothing has been on the market. I think people are still kind of experimenting.
But they already have the two, so they have the black oak, or the Gascon oak, and then the regular Limousine oak.
And then you have, you know, very traditional cognac producers like Jean Fillou, who, when I asked them, I said, "Are you gonna try that and play with different kinds of wood?" And he said, "Why should I? Cognac is cognac. I don't have to do that." Like, that would be stupid. That's the way, you know, some people react.
An interesting variation to an answer for this question is that we also we hooked up one of our whiskey supplier, who Armagnac, French whiskey, the oldest producer of French whiskey. We made the suggestion a few years ago that perhaps they considered using an Armagnac barrel,
as a finish.
And we didn't hear any more of it until 3 years later. He showed us one. He did it, and it was with the Darty Galon.
With the Darty Galon barrel.
And he used the Darty Galon barrel. So and it's a nice little subtle. It's an older barrel, but it was a nice little I don't know, fruity notes to the whiskey. It was quite good. Yeah. So, and we have that available.
Yeah. You get any royalties on having come up with that idea?
It's fun. It's the fun to know that our ideas get listened to.
Another question is, does anyone in Cognac produce a sparkling wine like in Champagne?
Yes, they do very little. In fact, Dupéra produces a sparkling, but it's not really a wine. It's kind of a sparkling. But no, I mean, really, I wouldn't say that there is any of that. Really, I mean, maybe some of them play with it, but really not much. No. Nothing that.
On kind of the question of, I guess, conversion efficiency, how many acres of grapes become how many bottles of brandy, or kind of what's the ratio?
That
Weight
I
of
don't know.
volume
That
of
I
grape.
don't know actually. Partly because it's this ratio is very, very regulated, and depending if you're in Cognac or in Armagnac. But I truly do not know that. What I do know is that, for example, 10 liters of wine will end up in about 1 liter of spirit. So you're like I said earlier on, when the Dutch were trying to evade the tax on volume, and they decided to burn the wine to reduce the volume, that's what they did, and it reduces about tenfold. So, but the actual acreage of vine for bottle, I don't know that. Good question. I will ask.
I just had to share this because we have a bottle here. This is the Armagnac. Yeah, I think they can now. The Armagnac with the Armagnac finish. Little tongue twister, but they were the first ones, I think, to have a single malt aged in Armagnac barrels. So there it is.
I'm imagining that if you took away the virtual background, it's just a wall of bottles.
Actually, not here, no. In other parts of the house, yes.
I thought you were just being humble by having a virtual background. Let's see. Had a question. A couple of folks asking about some, like other labeling or other brands. Kirkland Exo Cognac, which they believe is actually produced by Perrot. Do you know which Perrot it is, if that is the case?
Wait, Kirkland Cognac?
Yeah. Sorry, Costa is the Kirkland signature brand.
Yeah.
And they sell Exo Cognac.
It's not this Perrot. It's actually the Domaine Perrot, which is another producer who does bottle that Kirkland in a decanter. I think I've seen it.
With a similar name.
With a similar name, but they know of each other. It hasn't been a problem in terms of confusion so far, because one of them is called Domaine du Perrat and the other one is Distillerie du Perrat. So they know of each other, but no, du Perrat does not produce for Kirkland.
Okay. Very good. A couple other folks were asking about, can you comment on La Blanche Armagnac? I don't know if you've heard of this.
Yeah, we have.
This is a whole chapter right here.
It's a lovely question.
The Blanche Armagnac is actually one of the most recent AOC. They obtained the AOC in 2005. It's an unaged Armagnac. We had a lot of problem having TTB understand what it was and giving us an approval for it, for the label. But there's a few of them on the market. The lower one is actually, I can't show anything here. Nothing is appearing. So
let me see. What's this?
The lower one, you have it there. The Delors Armagnac Blanche is actually made from 100% Colombard. And now that product is double distilled. Not single, but double.
But with young, fresh fruit, just picked. It's the first thing they do in the distillation season is make the Blanche.
Yeah.
And where other producers sometimes just wait till whatever's left over and they're done. They say, well, let's make some Blanche and not age it. But these guys, they have a formula, 100% Colombard, young fruit. It's very fruity, fresh. It's delicious. Great with seafood.
Well, my favorite way of having it is put it in the freezer and drinking it as a vodka with smoked fish. That's
I like it with caviar.
Caviar, smoked fish. That's my favorite way. Consume it like a vodka, basically. But it has a great viscosity when it comes out of the freezer, and it has so much fruit. It's unbelievable for an unaged product. But it's not. It's a little bit difficult to sell. People don't know about it, and they wonder what it is. But it's really a great product. And the Delors particularly has gotten many awards.
There are a few clever, forward-thinking bartenders across the country who have featured it, and
In a cocktail.
good for them, because they're something unique and delicious.
It marries very well with citrus, any citrus fruit, with grapefruit, with kiwi, with saffron, with mint. It marries very well in any cocktail that have those ingredients. So it's really a nice product.
Very cool. I haven't tried it. I'd love to.
Yeah.
Another question was, and can you comment on, these are a couple other houses, I guess, Domaine d'Espérance or Louis Royer?
Okay. So Domaine de l'Espérance, I know very well. The owner, she actually tried to have us represent her product. The biggest problem, they're a wonderful product. The biggest problem we had with her are the pricing. The prices are just way too high compared to the competition. And this is not something we would have been able to sell well. So we had to turn down her offer. But they're good products. Just the price is just way too high. I don't know why, really. Maybe because it's more production. I don't know. I think there's more to it. But so, and in terms of Royer, well, Royer is a big company. They were actually, maybe they still are. They're part of Suntory, the Suntory group, the Japanese group. I don't know if they're still, but they were at some point. Big company. They mass produce. They sell their eau de vie to a lot of other producers or to a lot of big houses. They do have their own line, and the products. Some of the products are good. We haven't tasted them all. Some of the products are nice. I'm not sure what else to say. They're just big. For us, it's just a different business altogether.
Okay. Fair enough. Someone says, I butchered the wax-covered cork on my new bottle as I fought to remove the wax. The cap split off from the cork, and I'm not confident the cork will last long enough to preserve the spirit. Is it okay to use a silicone wine cork replacement to seal this back up? Or if not, what do you recommend?
Oh, any cork will do. Any cork, yeah, absolutely.
I mean, it's better to have one that's got a little wood on the end or something that you can just take it in. Now, we recycle our corks, and we have a whole drawer full of these types of corks that,
have a little head,
so, you know.
It happens. I mean, sometimes you do have a dry cork. It happens. There's no real reason for that.
No, but she cut it off, I guess. Trying to open it.
Yeah, any cork, you know.
As
long as it's well sealed, it's
that's the main thing. I mean, you know. Don't let it evaporate. Don't let the angels get it all.
I had a question here from Anthony. Anthony, maybe can I unmute you and have you ask? Seems like it might be something that we need to have you speak. All right, you are unmuted. Anthony from the Boston area.
I don't see him, but there he is.
Yeah, he is, yeah.
Cool background.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's my default. So I'm interested. So I was actually unaware of this until a tasting I did with Kevin for rums, I think, and it was esters. So there's these very sort of fruity notes but they're not fruit quite. And I was just curious about that with Armagnac and Cognac, because I've noticed it. I've been starting to notice this in things other than rum since Kevin introduced me to these things in rum. And I'm just curious about it because it's an interesting aroma, and it's mostly in the nose. And I'm just curious what where does it come from? What's the and how does it happen? I'm just fascinated.
This is a little bit of a chemist question here.
Sorry, I'm from MIT, so chemist questions are.
Wouldn't be surprised.
It's. I mean, alcohol is a little bit complicated. It's made of many different components, and esters. Of course, all alcohol has esters, and the esters can be different depending on what spirit you have. they basically respond to how do I say? They basically respond to they respond to the base material that is used to produce that whiskey, and so because of that, they will be different and affecting the aging and the taste and the flavor profile of each spirits depending on what the base is. Obviously, the esters from a Calvados will be different than the esters from a grape wine or grape brandy, or an apple brandy or a whiskey. You know, that's I'm not sure how much else I can tell you about it.
It sounds to me a little bit like the same problem talking about Rancio, which is we've heard debates from experts about Rancio. What exactly is it? You really can't name it or define it completely, but it sounds like it's more of the nose than of the taste buds. But
it's something I've noticed mostly.
Sorry,
not in whiskeys. More, it seems to be more prominent in either rum, so that's very sugar based, fruit, things that have a lot of sugar in the beginning. And I don't know if that matters or not, but that's my experience of it. So I was just curious.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I don't think I can expand too much about this.
We're not qualified enough in the chemistry department. Probably make it much further. You're probably more qualified. It sounds, but I think you're. But I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, there is sugars obviously in alcohol, right? And even if it comes from grains, there could be some esters, I suppose. But like you said, the emphasis is really strong. Well, on the rums or particularly the agricole rums probably, and the fruit-based brandies. But I'm going to have to look into that a little more. But thanks for bringing up that question, Anthony. Do you have anything to offer on it, like an answer?
I don't. I was noticing it, and I wanted to, I know where I don't know things, and so I look for expertise, and I was hoping, you had some knowledge here that you could impart, but it's fine.
No,
I'm just curious.
Yeah, it is a different kind of training. Actually, those who do that, they go to school for that, and they learn all about the molecules of alcohol and what esters are, and all the different results of depending on how you handle the alcohol. So we know what esters are, but I'm not sure how they really how much they affect the.
Thank you.
I love that kind of thinking. Thanks for bringing it up. Sorry we couldn't give you a more satisfying answer, but we're going to look into it.
It's great. Thank you.
All right.
I had a couple questions roll in while that discussion was going on. What are some examples of big producers and small producers of Armagnac and Cognac?
Well, in Cognac, we know them all. I mean,
they call them the Big Four. I bet you can all name them.
Rémy Martin, Courvoisier, Hennessy, and Martel are the Big Four. And then there's a few medium wines.
And by far, Hennessy is the biggest of them all.
Yeah, by far, yes. And after that, you have the medium size, like Ferrand, which is very popular in the US, Ferrand medium size. You have Biscuit, you have Hein, which is also quite popular here, and a few others. In Armagnac, there is no real big house. For a while, before we came into the market, the bigger brands were La Rosingle, which somebody else mentioned early on. La Rosingle, Darros, Montesquieu. But those, once Dan and I stepped onto the market, the Armagnac market, and started to promote our own Armagnac and became the largest importer of Armagnac, those kind of took the back seat a little bit because most of those bigger houses, and again, they're nothing compared to big cognac houses, they're still very small. They're not producers. They were just buying juice or buying distilled spirits and blending it and putting a label on it. Yeah. So in the 50s, when Armagnac came to the US, it was quite popular, and some of them are excellent, like Darros. Darros is an excellent brand.
But they focused on vintages a lot. They were focusing on vintages, expensive vintages, which is fun to have for gifts.
But other than that, in Armagnac, there is no big houses. There's 800 small producers, a few co-op, and that's it. And only 40 houses with a trade name, really. So that's very, very small. And the bigger one, again, La Rossang, Montesquieu is one. Sampé is another one that's been around, but that took the back seat because we kind of did a good job with Delors, Dufault, and Darty-Galland. So.
And our Armagnacs that we represent are all pretty fairly priced, very
Yeah.
fairly priced. Maybe.
Right.
In fact, kind of ticks off some of the other producers sometimes, saying that the prices are too low. So, what are you going to do?
Yeah.
Someone actually asked a question about that. How can you producers really make a profit when you're getting a kind of a 10-to-1 reduction from the wine to the brandy, just to the sheer volume that you would need to produce in the wine, I guess, and that goes into it. Do you have any comment on that?
I've asked this question many times because, again, since we had a couple of criticism from the competition telling us that our product were sold too inexpensive, it got me worried. So I turned to our producers and I said, listen, I know we always ask you for your best prices, but are you okay? Are you making a good living? I mean, you're not upset, And they both said, no, absolutely not. We're making a good living, but we don't have a chateau to maintain. We're not driving fancy cars like some other producers. So the question is the reverse, is why is Cognac so expensive? That's the question. It's not why is Armagnac so inexpensive and how can they make a living? I can guarantee you that the Armagnac producers that we work with, they make a decent living. Yes, they're not billionaires, but this is not their goal. Their goal is to produce art and to make great product. That's their goal. That's their ultimate goal. Their goal is not to buy a winery in Uruguay, like some of them, and some other producers just see it differently. And that's the main reason. But, it's hard to follow Cognac. Cognac kind of dictates the price, but Cognac has such an overhead of advertising and marketing money that they have to have expensive products. And right now, that's really why Cognac is more expensive than Armagnac, And maybe it won't last. I mean, if Armagnac takes off and continue to do well, like we hope, then maybe they will have to increase their price because at some point they will have to, But right now, everything is good.
I have a couple of bottles of Armagnac stored away, hoping that prices skyrocket like we've seen in some other spirits, and that'll be my retirement fund.
Okay. All right.
If not, I'll just drink them. It's all good. This is actually the last question that I have, so if someone else wants to ask one, you can please send it to me in the chat or do the raise hand feature, and we'll get to you. On storage, should you store Cognac and Armagnac on their sides or standing up?
Standing up. Always.
Unlike wines.
Unlike wines, yeah.
And what's the reason?
You don't want the cognac
to have,
you don't want the cognac to be, or the Armagnac to be touching the cork. It has a reverse effect that it has with wine. The cognac does not need to breathe, the wine needs to breathe, and that's why we want him to touch the cork so the breathing system can work through the cork with the wine. But in Cognac or Armagnac or any other brandy or any other spirits, we don't need it to be in touch with the cork. We don't need it to breathe. It stopped working once it's in the bottle, and that's it. So standing up.
Right, I know I've had some bottles, not of Cognac or Armagnac, but of whiskey, around for about a decade, and I go to open them, even though I did store them upright, the cork crumbles because it's completely desiccated by the alcohol.
Yeah.
So, putting any of these things on their side will just speed that process up.
Exactly.
I like this question. For my post-COVID-19 travel plans, would you recommend travel to more of these regions to visit the distilleries?
I didn't get that.
Yeah.
You broke up a little bit.
We do.
Sorry about that. For our post-COVID-19 travel plans, would you recommend traveling to one or more of these regions to visit the distilleries? And maybe I can add the additional question, which distillery or distilleries would you say are kind of the most like quintessential or idyllic distilleries that you would recommend?
Well, all those distilleries always welcome visitors, especially from America. And of course, we can always arrange appointments and things like that. They always welcome visitors.
And both regions are lovely, really.
Yeah.
And they're both a little lost in
They-
time in a sense.
Yeah,
It's,
they're both
you know,
wonderful region, very relaxing. As to traveling after the post-COVID, first of all, we don't know when COVID will be over or safe enough to travel. Dan and I were supposed to go there in April. We had to cancel. We are now scheduled to go at the end of July, and we're getting a little nervous about it. Mostly because of the plane, you know, because they can say that the air is filtered through blah, blah, blah. I don't know. I'm not sure about this. I feel very nervous.
but the reason we're going is because last August we bought a place not far from Jean-Fiou in the Grand Champagne region. And it's an older farmhouse. It needs some restoration. There's like 7 buildings, but 2 of them are already fixed up. And we were there to sort of renovate it, but we will be opening an 11-bedroom guest house at sometime in the future. So
Wow.
it's going to be a lovely place to come and walk. And it's in the middle of 600 acres of vineyards in Grand Champagne. So we're still working on the business plan, but hopefully that'll happen by next year. I don't know. We'll see.
And Jean-Fiou next door, again, is welcomes just, you know, anybody.
Great place to visit.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that we can recommend. They will be happy. So there's no better distilleries. I mean, there's some things that are more interesting, but maybe because from a tourist point of view, you know, like if you go to Cognac, well, the Chateau of Cognac, the Chateau Otard, the Cognac Otard is a beautiful place to visit because it has so much history. It's a castle. So it's a good thing. It has a tour guide with the tasting and everything. That's one, you need to do that once, I guess. It's a good thing. I would keep away visiting Hennessy or Rémy Martin because they put you on a train and go around the property, and it's not interesting in my mind. I don't think
the more
so.
adventurous could rent a houseboat on the Charente
Yes.
and go up and down the Charente and have fun doing that.
Yeah.
Camping out along the way.
But yeah, we'll see what happens.
They're all nice places to visit. The food is always good wherever you go in France. So I hope this thing ends soon and that we all can get back to enjoying good food, good life.
Yeah, absolutely. And along those lines, I think most folks on tonight were either from the Boston area or the Bay Area. Do you have any recommendations for good, you know, bars to go to, or restaurants to go to have a good selection of either category?
Well, our best and favorite restaurant in Boston is a French restaurant, and it's called La Voile on Newbury Street. Upstairs, they actually have the 1855 bar restaurant as well. And this account is the biggest supporter of our product. When you go there, you have literally 2 shelves that are just our products of spirits.
2 out of 3, I think.
2 out of 3 shelves are just our products.
Ask for Rory.
Rory is the bartender there, and he's amazing. He makes wonderful cocktails with our products. He sells just about everything we have in our portfolio. That's the best account we can recommend. Some of the other restaurants were getting nervous because we're not even sure they actually will reopen. So I'm not sure we can actually advertise them now at this point.
And I got to give a plug down on the South Shore, not far from our offices, is in Middleborough, Mass, is a place called the Charred Oak Tavern. And they have just done an incredible job in the last couple of years. They now have one of the largest whiskey selections in New England at their little bar here. Well, not that little, they've doubled in size. And the food is good, and I hope they get to open soon, because they also feature all of our Armagnacs, and you can get that Armagnac finish there, I believe, so, as well. So, locally,
as far as the Bay Area, I don't know. We haven't been there in a year, so things change a lot when it comes to bars. I'm trying to think. You kind of
how about the retailers
you kind of caught me off guard here. Well, the retailers, you know, I mean, K&L, D&M on Fillmore is one of our best retailers. The wine,
Fillmore.
Yes, but also the one in Orange County, High Time in Orange County, or the Wine House in Los Angeles. I mean, we have plenty of accounts in California that do an extremely good job with our Armagnac, actually, and cognacs. California is a big market for us, but the restaurants and bars, they move a lot, they change the product a lot, and it's hard to keep track of it.
If you're in Chicago, go to any Binny's store, and they carry almost all of our products. They're great.
Great. I guess I think we are pretty much exhausted on questions. I'll give you also a minute if you could just tell us a little bit more about everything that you carry, you know, at Heavenly Spirits. Obviously, brandy, whiskey as well you talked about, but I think you carry some other spirits in addition, and just be interested in a little snippet about that.
Yes, so we have 4 brands of Armagnac, of course, because that's the biggest part of our portfolio. This is also the biggest part of our income, I mean, our revenue. We have 4 Armagnacs, we have 3 cognac houses, actually.
Look at that. I can't even get
yeah.
my catalog in there. This, you know.
Yeah.
We've got a catalog now. We have an online interactive version of it.
Yeah.
There it is.
And so we have 4 Armagnacs, 3 cognac house. And again, the cognac house have all reasons to be represented because they all have different flavor profile, different history, different origin, different location. So that's really good. Then we have 2 Calvados producer, very different Calvados producers. One from the south part of Calvados that uses a lot of pear in his blend. Then we have, of course, the single malt from France, the oldest single malt in France, the original wheat dram, Armorique from Brittany.
Wonderful new line of vermouth. If you like vermouth.
We have a new line of vermouth from France, from Cognac, made in Cognac. We have a couple of gins. One of them is from the island right across from my hometown in Cognac, Ile de Ré, and they produce a gin that has a seaweed in it. So we call it oceanic gin. We have a vodka made from potatoes. We have, let me see, we have an absinthe, of course. We have to have an absinthe, one of the best absinthe produced organically.
Totally the real
with,
deal.
Absinthe actually grown on the premise. We have a couple of liqueurs. We have cassis from 2 different producers. And what else do we have? I mean, it's a fairly small portfolio. It's roughly about 15 different producers.
There we go.
Yeah, this is a map of where we put our bottles, our producers. It's partly part of it. And again, we're not trying to become a large importer. We're trying to stay very, very focused on high-end, craft, family-owned spirit from France. That's really, really our mission. It's always been our mission. And we had to turn down a lot of products because of that, but we want to stay very focused. And it's a lot of work too, because
it keeps us busy and it's a lot of fun.
We have to do everything. So our producers give us a great price. They don't have much money for marketing or anything, so we have to do everything ourselves. So, but that's our portfolio. And again, if you want to see it, it's www.heavenlyspirits.com. Very easy to remember. We have a virtual catalog right on our website on the first page. And we have a lot of information on...
sign up for our quarterly newsletter. We will invite people to tastings when we get back to them, and also have articles on some of the producers and whatnot. So that you can sign up for that on our front page of our website.
Awesome. Well, thank you both so much. This is a fantastic amount of information and good taste. Really appreciate your putting the work in to condense a lot of information, distill it down, if you will, into a very short amount of time. Thanks for working with me on that. And I hope we get to taste some of the other spirits in the future. I have unmuted everyone, and actually, I'm going to mute and allow you to unmute yourselves. There we go. I'll mute Dan and Christine. This is the conclusion. I'm going to take off, and I think Dan and Christine probably need to go have some food too, but this Zoom will stay open as long as anybody is on it. So if anyone else wants to hang out and chat with fellow attendees, you're welcome to stay as long as you like. With that, I'll bid you adieu, and Dan and Christine, thank you.
Thank you, Kevin.
Yes, the recording will, I will turn that off as well.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody. I'm sorry we couldn't see everybody.
Cheers.
Thank you, Christine.
Kevin.
Take care.